Now, a 29-year-old man has been arrested for allegedly raping his ex-girlfriend and instructing 3 homeless men to rape her too. The man is alleged to have paid the men around 100 rand each after they raped the woman. The other 3 suspects have not been arrested yet for the incident that took place in Johannesburg on the 16th of December. So the question that we ask today is, how can government and civil society curb the increase in gender-based violence-related crimes, and specifically around the festive season? To speak to us about this is human rights activist and chair of the Commonwealth Equality Network, Steve Letsike. A very good afternoon to you, Steve. I mean, the story that we're just sharing now really is horrendous. And not only the fact that the ex-boyfriend raped the woman, but also getting other people to rape her too, that also just amplifies, the dark nature of this crime. Can you talk to us more about that? How much do you know about this?
Yeah, no, Tammy, thank you, and good afternoon to the viewers of Newzroom. I think, you know what, it is quite a sad reality that women experience violence in this horrendous manner. And this is unacceptable behavior. And I mean, this recent incident that you have alluded to, of a man who's allegedly had raped, but also went to get additional 3 more homeless men and paid them on top of the violence that was perpetrated against this woman. We've heard of the investigating officer Mbele, who had reportedly that, the man has been arrested, but the other 3 who were also complicit to be invited to this perpetrated act have not yet been arrested. It is horrific. It is trauma, but it's also violence that is used as a weapon against the women's bodies, and taking away the power of women, and men using this as a weapon for aggression against women.
And so how can government and civil rights activists and communities jointly work together to change the thought pattern as well as the behaviors that lead to rape and gender-based violence?
I think, for the longest time, South Africa has put plans ahead. There was an establishment of the Gender-Based Violence Council. The president has pronounced, gender-based violence as a crisis, as a disaster for South Africa, because South Africa still ranks the highest in the world gender-based violence. And I mean, there was a strategic plan to respond to the high levels of gender-based violence. We've seen GBV and femicide, as well as hate crime response intervention strategies being put in place. I think both government and civil society has been working hand in hand, but also there's been a call around a rapid approach from government side. First is the agency of the rule of law. Quite a lot of perpetrators are walking down the road freely. They are let out of jail with bail, very low bail, while it is their right as well, but they have taken away and violated somebody else's right. And we must understand the impact even of gender-based violence it has on our health facilities, on the mental health of the victim or survivor for that matter, but also their families and communities. Tammy, I think it's quite important to note that as a country, we spend 45 billion annually just to respond on gender-based violence. So you can just imagine, if we are to change our behavior as society, this 45 billion should be working towards job creation and other things. But the violence that we've seen, not only just during festive, when the lockdown regulations started in early 2020, we've seen women were stuck, LGBTI people were stuck with very patriarchal, very homophobic, transphobic, and very abusive partners because of intimate partner violence. And we've seen the results. The outcome of this, it's violation, it's survivors reporting violence against them. And government and civil society has been doing that. I think the biggest challenge is society. It's men that must really not only just self-reflect, but it's really the behavior that must never be accepted. Why have we normalized violence, and we, as well as society, are part of the silent or look away of what is happening within our neighborhoods? And I think what we need to be seeing more and more, it's calling the law enforcement, calling for the rule of law, but also the behavior, and calling out the perpetrators that act in this manner. Law on its own is not enough. We want government to implement it in a fast manner, but we also want South Africans and those in the country to really change their behavior, and those who perpetrate must be held accountable.
I must ask, Steve, the approach from South Africa as a country towards perpetrators of crime is really one of rehabilitation. If you listen to our language, we talk about changing the behavior of men. We talk about a change in mindset. So it's really about a transformation of the individual. But is this approach actually working? Should perhaps punishment not trump that rehabilitation? We talk about introspection, which is what you mentioned now. How does that introspection happen without incentive? Just your thoughts on that particular approach.
I absolutely agree with you, Tammy. Our response, just in terms of justice and also the kind of restorativeness and rehabilitation approaches, one would say they are working for others, but it's not working for other inmates or those who are perpetrators. Shouldn't we think through about modes of a kind of punishment that is required? Because at the end of the day, when you act in a violent manner and taking away somebody's right and violating it, your act is abusive. Your act it's completely out of order, and you've actually have done an injustice towards another person. So we need a multi-pronged approach. And my personal view, our own rehabilitation approach is not enough. It can be one of the pronged approach, but it's not enough. We need to actually tighten up the belt of what seeking justice is for the survivor, because the survivor should be the center, not the perpetrator. The perpetrator cannot be the center of our response. They have violated, and they must face the music. And facing the music means that you have to lay in the bed that you have made yourself. So in that case, a multi-pronged response in a way that suggests our rule of law, that even when you go into jail, you understand the implication of the violation, but you also understand that when you are there, you are ought to account for your action, and when you come out, it must never happen again. So I foresee that it's something as an approach we need to be taking. We've seen what has happened even within communities, that community respond in a violent manner when they find a perpetrator around their communities, because there's a lack of trust even on our South African police service. People are not arrested on time, or people are not, even when communities bring evidence, we want people to be arrested, because this is a citizen's role, but there's also the responsibility of the police service, including the rest of the judiciary system.
You mentioned there, Steve, a survivor-centric approach, an approach that focuses on the survivor, that the survivor must be the center. How would that approach look like, and how would it differ from what we are currently implementing?
I think first is that, we have to center a number of services towards the survivor. And also not only just centering, but listening to what the survivor articulates their needs are. Because at the same time, we sometimes put packages of intervention thinking that this is what the survivor needs. But yet, when we listen to what the survivor needs, including psychosocial support, including what happens in their own environment. Often when somebody is abused, is raped, and it's violated at home, if you take intimate partner violence, often it's the survivor that has to leave the house, because the very same perpetrator who's their partner at home still remains. They have to be moved to a shelter. Why is the perpetrator not be the one who's moving out of the house? So the environment, the economic challenge, and some of the realities of the survivors does matter. So psychosocial support, health services, but even in the environmental aspect of what the survivor needs must take shape. We take perpetrators, for instance, when they are arrested, they live comfortably. They eat, sleep, and they are taken care. There even is security for them because of wardens and so forth. But then who takes care of the survivor? And also who then makes sure that the survivors' consistency of services are ensured? Of course, we've got programs such as Tutuzela centers, which have been brought forward as a central one-stop center, you know, where the police, the health, and the justice element is incorporated. But it's not enough. The families, what happens to the children? What happens to the families around psychosocial support? It's not a once-off thing. But at the same time, the court support, we've seen many cases where survivors go to court, they are not prepared, or they don't know whether there's a hearing for this perpetrator, and then they see people out. So for me, there's components of what we do from a social, structural, but at the same time, from an economic aspect, that we need to center the survivor in this case.
Steve Letsike, a human rights advocate and chair of the Commonwealth Equality Network, thank you so much for your time and sharing your views regarding how gender-based violence can be approached in the country.